The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Private Emma Hayes completed her combat readiness course run. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she approached the finish line, her legs trembling from exhaustion, but her determination unwavering. She had been pushing herself harder than ever since joining the Special Operations Support Company 6 months ago, desperate to prove that she belonged among the toughest soldiers in the regiment. Sergeant Donovan watched from the sidelines, his face twisted with barely concealed contempt. He had made it clear from day one that he didn't believe women had any place in combat units. Every time Emma excelled in training, his resentment grew deeper. Today, something in his expression suggested that his patience had finally run out. "Hayes," Donovan barked as Emma bent over, catching her breath. "Your form was sloppy. Your time was pathetic. You're holding back the entire unit with your weakness." Emma straightened up, meeting his gaze directly. "Sergeant, my time was actually 2 seconds faster than yesterday, and I completed every obstacle according to regulation standards." Her voice remained steady despite the anger building in her chest. The other soldiers in the unit shifted uncomfortably. They had witnessed Donovan's increasingly hostile behavior toward Emma, but military hierarchy made it dangerous to speak up. Corporal Brooks, who had become Emma's closest friend in the unit, clenched his fists but remained silent. Donovan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Are you questioning my assessment, soldier? Because from where I stand, you're nothing but a liability. A pretty face who thinks she can play soldier with the big boys." Emma's jaw tightened. She had endured months of this treatment, hoping that her performance would eventually earn his respect. But as she looked into Donovan's cold eyes, she realized that no amount of excellence would change his mind. "I'm not playing at anything, Sergeant. I earned my place here just like everyone else." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Donovan's face flushed red, and the other soldiers could feel the tension crackling between them. What happened next would change everything for the entire unit, though none of them could have predicted the devastating consequences that would follow. Donovan's breathing became heavy, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The afternoon training session had suddenly transformed into something much more dangerous, and everyone present could sense that a line was about to be crossed that could never be uncrossed. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sounds of other training exercises echoing across the base. Emma maintained her stance, neither backing down nor escalating the confrontation. She had learned early in her military career that showing fear or submission to bullies only made them worse. "You think you're tough," Donovan snarled, his voice now loud enough for the entire squad to hear clearly. "You think you deserve to be here with real soldiers? Let me show you what happens to people who don't know their place." The other soldiers exchanged worried glances. Corporal Brooks took a small step forward, ready to intervene if necessary, but uncertain how to navigate the dangerous waters of military protocol and personal loyalty. Private Ramirez stood frozen near the equipment rack, his hands gripping a training vest so tightly his knuckles turned white. The afternoon that had started like any other was about to become a day that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. What happened next occurred so quickly that most witnesses would later struggle to give coherent accounts. Donovan stepped forward with the speed of someone who had clearly been contemplating this moment for weeks. His right leg swung up in a vicious arc, connecting with the side of Emma's head with a sickening crack that echoed across the training ground. Emma's body went limp instantly. She crumpled to the ground like a marionette whose strings had been cut, her head striking the hard-packed earth with another disturbing thud. Blood began to pool beneath her skull, dark and spreading against the pale afternoon dust. The squad stood frozen in shock for several crucial seconds. Corporal Brooks was the first to break free from the paralysis, dropping to his knees beside Emma's motionless form. "She's not breathing," he shouted, his training kicking in as he checked for a pulse. His fingers searched frantically for any sign of life while Donovan stood over them, breathing heavily, seeming to realize for the first time what he had done. "Call the medics now," Brooks screamed at the other soldiers who scattered to find help. Private Ramirez sprinted toward the communications building while others formed a protective circle around Emma's unconscious body. Donovan's face had gone white as paper. The rage that had driven him to strike her was rapidly being replaced by the cold realization of the consequences. He had crossed a line that no amount of authority or military protocol could protect him from crossing. In his anger, he had potentially killed a fellow soldier in front of multiple witnesses. She was asking for it, he muttered weakly, as if trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. She wouldn't show proper respect. I was just trying to discipline her. Brooks looked up from where he knelt beside Emma, his eyes blazing with fury. You kicked an unarmed soldier in the head, you maniac. This isn't discipline. This is attempted murder. The medical team arrived within minutes, their boots pounding across the ground as they rushed to assess Emma's condition. The lead medic immediately began checking her vital signs while his partner prepared emergency equipment. Severe head trauma, he called out grimly. We need to get her to the post-medical center immediately. As the medics worked to stabilize Emma for transport, Donovan remained standing nearby, his hands shaking slightly as the full weight of his actions began to sink in. The other soldiers had backed away from him, their expressions ranging from disgust to outright fear. In a single moment of uncontrolled rage, he had destroyed not only Emma's life, but also his own career and the reputation of their entire unit. The medics loaded Emma onto a stretcher, her face pale and unresponsive. Blood had soaked through the bandages they had hastily applied to her head wound as they rushed her toward the waiting ambulance. Brooks made a decision that would prove crucial in the hours to come. I'm calling this in, he announced to the remaining soldiers. This goes straight to the top. No covering this up. No protecting anyone. What happened here today was completely inexcusable. Donovan finally seemed to understand that his world was about to come crashing down around him. You don't understand the chain of command, Corporal. This stays within the unit until proper procedures can be followed. But Brooks was already walking away, heading toward the communications building with determined steps. The wheels of military justice were about to begin turning, and they would move faster and more decisively than anyone could have anticipated. Corporal Brooks burst through the doors of the communications center with the urgency of someone carrying life or death information. The duty officer, Lieutenant Morrison, looked up from his paperwork immediately, sensing that something serious had occurred. Sir, I need to report a critical incident involving assault on a fellow soldier, Brooks said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Sergeant Donovan just kicked Private Hayes in the head. She's unconscious and being rushed to the post-medical center. Lieutenant Morrison's pen froze halfway through signing a routine form. In his 5 years of service, he had seen plenty of disciplinary issues, but nothing like this. Are you certain about what you're reporting, Corporal? This is an extremely serious accusation. I saw it happen with my own eyes, sir. So did 6 other soldiers in our unit. Donovan lost his temper during a training exercise and kicked Hayes in the head. She went down immediately and hasn't regained consciousness. Morrison immediately reached for his secure phone line. The gravity of the situation demanded immediate notification of the chain of command. While Brooks provided a detailed account of the incident, Morrison began making the calls that would set a rapid response in motion. The first call went to Major Turner, the battalion commander, who was in the middle of reviewing quarterly training reports when his phone rang. Upon hearing Morrison's report, Turner's expression grew increasingly grim. Are you telling me that a sergeant in my battalion just assaulted a subordinate soldier during a training exercise? Yes, sir. The incident occurred approximately 20 minutes ago. The victim is currently being transported to the post-medical center with severe head trauma. Turner set down his papers and reached for his jacket. I'm heading to the medical center immediately. Continue up the chain. Colonel Patel needs to know about this within the hour, and Morrison, make sure that training ground is secured as a crime scene. No one goes in or out without my authorization. The second call went to Colonel Patel, the regimental commander, who was attending a meeting with visiting military officials from allied countries. When his aide whispered the urgent message in his ear, Patel's face darkened visibly. He excused himself from the international guests and stepped into a private office to take the call. "This is unacceptable," Patel said after hearing the full report. "A sergeant attacking a subordinate soldier is bad enough, but a male soldier assaulting a female soldier makes this a potential scandal that could damage the entire military's reputation." Patel immediately contacted General Kim, the base commander, who had built her career on maintaining the highest standards of discipline and professionalism. When she received the call, she was reviewing applications for a prestigious military leadership program. The irony was not lost on her that she was reading about soldiers who exemplified military values while learning about one who had completely abandoned them. "General, we have a situation that requires immediate intervention," Patel reported. "One of our sergeants has physically assaulted a female private during training. The victim is currently hospitalized with severe head injuries." General Kim set aside the applications and focused entirely on the crisis at hand. She had spent years working to improve conditions for women in the military and to eliminate the toxic behaviors that had plagued the service for too long. This incident represented everything she had been fighting against. "I want a complete investigation launched immediately," she ordered. "And Patel, I want to know everything about this unit. Their training records, disciplinary history, command structure, everything. If this sergeant felt comfortable enough to assault a subordinate in front of witnesses, there are probably deeper problems we need to address." Within 2 hours of the incident, the report had reached the Pentagon, where it landed on the desk of General Collins, a man known throughout the military for his zero-tolerance approach to misconduct and his commitment to protecting soldiers from abuse by their superiors. General Collins had seen enough military scandals in his 30-year career to know that swift, decisive action was the only way to prevent a bad situation from becoming a catastrophe. As he reviewed the preliminary report about Sergeant Donovan's assault on Private Hayes, his jaw tightened with each detail. Collins immediately convened an emergency conference call with 2 other generals, General Kim and General Reed, the head of military personnel affairs. The 3-way conversation would determine the fate of Donovan's entire unit within the next hour. "Gentlemen, we have a clear case of a superior officer assaulting a subordinate soldier," Collins began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never tolerated such behavior. "But what concerns me more is how this incident could have occurred in the first place. Where's the oversight? Where were the checks and balances that should have prevented this?" General Kim provided the preliminary investigation findings. "Sir, we're discovering that Sergeant Donovan had a history of discriminatory behavior toward female soldiers. Multiple soldiers in his unit report that he regularly made inappropriate comments and created a hostile environment. And yet he remained in a leadership position," General Reed interjected. "This suggests a systemic failure in the command structure. If subordinate soldiers felt safe enough to report these behaviors to investigators today, why didn't they feel safe reporting them before the assault occurred?" The answer was becoming clear as more details emerged from the investigation. Donovan's immediate superior, Lieutenant Colonel Foster, had received several informal complaints about Donovan's behavior over the past months. However, Foster had dismissed these concerns, attributing them to normal military discipline and soldiers needing to toughen up. Collins's voice grew colder as he processed this information. "So we have a pattern of discriminatory behavior that was ignored by the chain of command, culminating in a physical assault that could have killed a soldier. This isn't just about one bad sergeant. This is about a command structure that failed to protect its people." The generals began discussing immediate actions. Donovan would obviously be arrested and court-martialed, but the question remained about what to do with the rest of the unit and their leadership. The investigation was revealing that several other non-commissioned officers in the unit had witnessed Donovan's discriminatory behavior and done nothing to stop it. "I'm recommending complete dissolution of the unit," General Kim stated. "We need to send a clear message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated at any level, and that failing to report misconduct is just as serious as committing it." General Reed agreed. "The soldiers who witnessed today's assault and the previous incidents of harassment need to understand that they have a responsibility to speak up when they see wrongdoing. Their silence enabled this assault to happen. Collins made the final decision. Very well. I'm authorizing the immediate disbandment of Donovan's unit. All personnel will be reassigned to different commands after thorough review of their conduct. Any soldier found to have enabled or ignored Donovan's behavior will face disciplinary action. But Collins wasn't finished. His investigation had revealed that Lieutenant Colonel Foster had ignored multiple warning signs about Donovan's behavior. Foster is relieved of command effective immediately. His failure to address Donovan's conduct makes him partially responsible for what happened to Private Hayes. The generals agreed that they needed to personally oversee the unit's dissolution to ensure that their message was unmistakable. "We're going to fly out there together," Collins announced. When soldiers see 3 generals arriving to disband an entire unit, they'll understand that this behavior has consequences that reach the very top of the military hierarchy. General Kim checked the latest medical report on Private Hayes. She's stable, but still unconscious. The doctors say the next 24 hours will be critical in determining if there's permanent brain damage. The weight of that information settled over the 3 generals. A young woman who had volunteered to serve her country was fighting for her life because of the failures of the military system they were sworn to protect. Their response would need to be proportional to the gravity of that failure. "We leave for the base in 2 hours," Collins declared. "I want every soldier in that unit to understand that their military careers may be over because they failed to protect one of their own." The 3 military helicopters descended onto the Fort Bragg landing pad with precision timing that spoke to the urgency of their mission. General Collins emerged from the lead aircraft, followed closely by Generals Kim and Reed. Their faces were grim masks of determination as they strode across the tarmac toward the waiting vehicles. Word of the general's arrival had spread through the base like wildfire. Soldiers throughout the installation watched from windows and doorways as the convoy of gray vehicles made its way toward the barracks that housed Donovan's unit. Many had heard rumors about what had happened during the afternoon training exercise, but seeing 3 generals arrive within hours of the incident confirmed that something unprecedented was taking place. The remaining members of Donovan's unit had been confined to their barracks pending the investigation. They sat on their bunks in uncomfortable silence, each wondering what their future held. Sergeant Donovan himself had been arrested and was already in the base's military detention facility, but his absence only made the atmosphere more tense. Corporal Brooks paced nervously near the window, occasionally glancing out at the activity surrounding their building. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered to Private Ramirez. 3 generals for 1 incident. "Maybe it's because she's a woman," Ramirez replied quietly. "Maybe they're taking it more seriously because of that." Private Wilson, who had been silent since witnessing the assault, finally spoke up. "It's not just because she's a woman. It's because we all saw it happening, and none of us did enough to stop it. Donovan didn't just snap today. He's been building up to this for months." The weight of that realization settled over the room. Each soldier began reflecting on the moments when they could have spoken up, when they could have reported Donovan's behavior, when they could have done something to prevent Emma Hayes from being kicked unconscious on a training ground. Outside, the generals were conducting rapid-fire meetings with the base's senior leadership. They reviewed Donovan's personnel file, examined the unit's training records, and interviewed the soldiers who had witnessed the assault. What they discovered painted a disturbing picture of a toxic leadership environment that had been allowed to fester unchecked. "This unit has been operating with a complete breakdown of military values," General Collins told the assembled base commanders. "Discrimination, harassment, and intimidation have been normalized to the point where soldiers felt powerless to report misconduct." General Kim reviewed the witness statements that had been collected throughout the afternoon. Every single soldier in that unit admits they knew Donovan had problems with female soldiers. They all saw him creating a hostile environment. And yet, not one of them filed a formal complaint until after he nearly killed someone. The post-medical center provided an update on Emma's condition. She had regained consciousness briefly, but remained in intensive care with a severe concussion and potential brain swelling. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but warned that she would require months of rehabilitation and might never be able to return to active duty. General Reed studied the unit's organizational chart and training schedules. The problem extends beyond Donovan. His immediate supervisors created an environment where this behavior was tolerated. The soldiers under his command enabled it by their silence. This entire unit has failed in its fundamental duty to protect and support fellow soldiers. As evening approached, the generals made their final preparations for what would be a historic moment in military discipline. No unit had been disbanded for this type of misconduct in recent memory, but the severity of the situation demanded an unprecedented response. "We're not just disbanding this unit," General Collins explained to his colleagues. "We're sending a message to every soldier in the military that toxic leadership and bystander indifference have consequences that reach the very top of the command structure." The soldiers in the barracks could see the increased activity outside their building. Military police had taken positions around the perimeter, and official vehicles continued arriving throughout the afternoon. Whatever was about to happen, they knew it would change their lives forever. Corporal Brooks looked at his fellow soldiers and realized that their military careers might be over before they even understood what had gone wrong. The unit that had once prided itself on being elite was about to become an example of everything the military was trying to eliminate. The barracks doors opened with military precision as the three generals entered, their polished boots echoing against the floor in perfect synchronization. The soldiers of Donovan's unit scrambled to attention, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear, confusion, and dawning realization about the severity of their situation. General Collins stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Soldiers, I'm General Marcus Collins. With me are General Kim and General Reed. We are here to address the complete failure of leadership and military values that occurred in this unit today." The silence in the room was deafening. Each soldier stood rigidly at attention, but their eyes betrayed their growing understanding that this was not a routine disciplinary meeting. The presence of three generals meant that their careers, their futures, and everything they had worked for was now in jeopardy. At approximately 1400 hours this afternoon, Sergeant Donovan physically assaulted Private Hayes with a kick to the head that left her unconscious and fighting for her life, General Collins continued. "This assault occurred in front of multiple witnesses, including each of you." General Kim stepped forward, her expression stern but controlled. "Our investigation has revealed that this assault was not an isolated incident. Sergeant Donovan had demonstrated a pattern of discriminatory behavior, harassment, and intimidation toward female soldiers for months. Each of you was aware of this behavior." The soldiers remained motionless, but several faces had grown pale as they realized the implications of what they were hearing. They had all hoped that Donovan's arrest would be the end of the matter, but it was becoming clear that the consequences would extend far beyond one sergeant's criminal behavior. "Private Hayes is currently in intensive care with a severe head injury that may permanently affect her ability to serve," General Reed added. "She volunteered to defend her country, and instead of receiving the support and protection she deserved from her fellow soldiers, she was assaulted by her superior officer while you stood by and watched." Corporal Brooks felt his stomach tighten as the full weight of their collective failure became clear. He had considered himself Emma's friend, had wanted to protect her, but when the moment of crisis arrived, he had been paralyzed by military protocol and hierarchy. General Collins resumed speaking, his voice growing even more serious. "The military exists on the principle that soldiers protect and support each other. When that principle breaks down, the entire system fails. Your unit has failed not just Private Hayes, but every principle the military stands for." The general walked slowly in front of the assembled soldiers, making eye contact with each one. "You witnessed discriminatory behavior and said nothing. You saw harassment and did nothing. You allowed a toxic environment to develop under your watch. And when that toxicity exploded into violence, you were powerless to prevent it because you had already surrendered your moral authority." General Kim opened the official document she had been carrying. "By order of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, effective immediately, this unit is hereby disbanded. Your military occupational specialties are revoked, and you will be reassigned to different commands pending individual review of your conduct. The impact of these words hit the soldiers like physical blows. Their unit, which had been their identity and their source of pride, was being dissolved because of their collective failure to act with integrity and courage. Some of you may face disciplinary action, ranging from reprimands to discharge from military service, General Reed explained. Your failure to report Sergeant Donovan's misconduct makes you complicit in creating the environment that led to Private Hayes' assault. Private Ramirez felt tears beginning to form in his eyes. He had joined the military to serve his country with honor. But now he was learning that his silence in the face of wrongdoing had made him part of the problem rather than part of the solution. Your commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Foster, has been relieved of duty for failing to address reports of misconduct within this unit, General Collins announced. His career is over because he chose to ignore warning signs rather than protect the soldiers under his command. The generals prepared to leave, but General Kim turned back to address the soldiers one final time. Private Hayes may never fully recover from her injuries. She may never be able to serve again. As you are reassigned to new commands, remember that your silence and inaction contributed to that outcome. Let that knowledge guide your future behavior as soldiers. As the three generals departed, the soldiers remained standing at attention until they heard the vehicles driving away from their barracks. Only then did they allow themselves to collapse onto their bunks, finally understanding that their military careers would never be the same. 6 months after the disbandment of their unit, the lives of everyone involved had been permanently altered by the events of that afternoon training session. The ripple effects of Sergeant Donovan's assault on Private Emma Hayes continued to spread throughout the military establishment, creating lasting changes in policy, training, and culture. Sergeant Donovan himself had been court-martialed and sentenced to 8 years in military prison for assault and conduct unbecoming of a non-commissioned officer. During his trial, additional evidence emerged of his discriminatory behavior toward multiple female soldiers throughout his career. His military benefits were revoked, and he received a dishonorable discharge that would follow him for the rest of his civilian life. Lieutenant Colonel Foster faced his own court-martial for dereliction of duty. His failure to investigate reports of Donovan's misconduct had directly contributed to Emma's assault. He was sentenced to reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, and early retirement without benefits. The career he had built over 20 years in the military ended in disgrace and financial hardship. Emma Hayes' recovery had been long and difficult. The traumatic brain injury she suffered required months of intensive rehabilitation, as she continued to experience headaches, memory issues, and balance problems. Medical evaluators determined that she would never be able to return to active combat duty, effectively ending the military career she had worked so hard to build. Despite her physical limitations, Emma had found new purpose as an advocate for military reform. She testified before Congress about the toxic culture that had enabled her assault, and her powerful testimony led to new legislation requiring mandatory reporting of discriminatory behavior and strengthening protections for military whistleblowers. Corporal Brooks had been reassigned to a logistics unit where his military career continued, but remained forever marked by his failure to act decisively when Emma needed protection. He had received counseling and additional training on reporting procedures, and he now served as a mentor to new soldiers, sharing his hard-learned lessons about the importance of speaking up against misconduct. The other soldiers from the disbanded unit had been scattered across different commands, each carrying the weight of their collective failure. Some had been discharged from the military entirely, while others remained in service with permanent marks on their records. Private Ramirez had requested transfer to a military police unit, hoping to spend the rest of his career protecting soldiers from the kind of abuse Emma had endured. The three generals who had ordered the unit's disbandment had become symbols within the military of the new zero-tolerance approach to misconduct. General Collins had been promoted to chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he implemented sweeping reforms to military training and discipline procedures. General Kim had established a new military academy program focused specifically on ethical leadership and the prevention of toxic military culture. Her program became mandatory for all new officers and was credited with significantly reducing incidents of harassment and discrimination throughout the armed forces. Fort Bragg, where the assault occurred, had become a model for progressive military culture. New training programs emphasized the duty of every soldier to report misconduct, and clear procedures were established to protect soldiers who came forward with complaints about their superiors. Emma's assault had also sparked broader conversations about women in combat roles and the ongoing challenges they faced within military culture. Her case became a rallying point for advocates pushing for greater equality and protection for female service members.